this is where you say there's nothing left to be said, which is such a Jewish way of mourning. You walk into a shiva home, and a lot of people don't know how to do shiva in the traditional way, and they're nervous, so they come in and they start chattering. But actually, shiva, traditionally speaking, you wait for the mourner to indicate what they want to talk about, if they want to talk, all of that. I mean, I've gone into shiva homes before where I have gone in, sat next to the mourner, held their hand for half an hour, and we haven't said a word.
That was Rabbi Shoshana Boyd Gelfand discussing the song Nothing Left to Be Said, which Liz Hanlon and I wrote after being inspired by Psalm 49. I'm Shep Rosenman. This is The Rest is Commentary, where we discuss what songs inspired by the Psalms inspire in my guests. In addition to being a rabbi, Shoshana is an author and educator. She's also a mentor of mine. Raised in the U.S., she currently serves as Director of Leadership and Learning at Pears Foundation in London, where she lives with her husband and 3 children. Shoshana is passionate about making Jewish wisdom accessible and meaningful to people of all faiths. She teaches Hebrew Bible to priests as a visiting scholar at Sarum College, a Christian theological seminary, and serves as vice chair of the International Jewish Committee on Interreligious Consultations, which liaises on behalf of the global Jewish community to the Vatican and other international faith bodies. Shoshana regularly appears on BBC Radio and has written several books that strive to make Jewish tradition accessible to people of all faiths, including The Barefoot Book of Jewish Tales and Scholastics, all about Hanukkah or Hanukkah. Additionally, she founded JDOV, a Jewish TED-style video platform, which you can find at www.jdov.org. In this episode, we discuss the importance of silence, the elements of a good shiva, polarity management, direct talk, music as a vital tool for grieving, how rituals, storytelling, and community all help you navigate life when someone you love dies, and so much more. Let's start off by listening to Nothing Left to Be Said. The room filled with conversation. Forks and knives clank against the plates. Sister drinks an off-brand whiskey. Brother, vodka tonic that he hates. Pastor brought the fruitcake. Mama brought the wine. There's nothing left to be said, and me, I brought the bread. Mama wears her only pearls, thinks we need her to be stoic. She's painted on a poker face. That's her version of heroic. Pastor brought the fruitcake. Mama brought the wine. There's nothing left to be said, and me, I brought the bread. About our missing friend. Instead, it's gossip, news, and school. Together, yet we're each alone. Junior fidgets on a stool. Pastor brought the fruitcake. Mama brought the wine. Nothing left to be said, and me, I Do you want to tell the story of how we know each other, or do you want me to?
Oh, that's such a good question, because I wonder if it's the same story. So I think I first met you during your Wexner interview.
That's right.
Okay. And I remember that interview thinking to myself, what a clever guy. He has somehow managed to pull together his analytic side, his lawyer side, with his emotional, passionate side, the music side. And I was very, very envious of you that you had done that. That's my first
that's
memory.
The secret. Amazing. Amazing. Well, I remember that meeting too and saying, I really hope I get in because this is someone I want to have the opportunity to learn with. And Wexner, do you want to explain what Wexner is?
So Wexner is a program that's been going for over 30 years. And the focus of the foundation is leadership. And the bit of the foundation that we were part of was for lay leaders, for people who were in leadership positions, not as professionals in the Jewish community, but doing that holy work of just chairing organizations and founding organizations and supporting the professionals. And it was basically a 2-year sort of master's program equivalent in Jewish history and prayer, in Jewish texts, as well as thinking about that through a leadership lens. And that's what we did. So I remember over the course of those 2 years, really thinking deeply with you about things. And I also remember during the course of those 2 years, your mother died. And I was out in LA teaching, and we did a lunch and learn at your law firm.
That's right.
And I even remember what we studied. It was the Kadisha.
That's right.
We were studying the Kadisha, and it was something new that I was teaching in memory of your mother. It was very meaningful.
It was very meaningful for me too. You were a deeply grounding person in that process for me. My mom died, in retrospect, not suddenly, because she had had strokes and had heart disease. But, for me, it was suddenly.
It was your mother.
Exactly. And she had just lived with us for 4 months, and she'd overcome stroke number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. She had a heart attack, overcame that. And she went to Israel to be with as she put it, she wants to see her other Einiklach, her other grandchildren. And I was like, okay, well, they're going to be there for a while, and then they're going to come back to LA. And 7 weeks later, she died. And it really hit me hard. And having the Wexner program, but specific individuals within it, you, Rabbi Landis, Yitz Greenberg, Arna, there are a few people that I really connected with who became fulcrums in my life of Jewish learning. When I was a young person, I learned the basics. I had foundational learning as a yeshiva bacher because I was at Rabbi Chait's yeshiva, and I went to the Hailai or Haftar for yeshiva day school, but I wasn't into it. At Wexner, I learned how to love learning so that I could use those mechanics again. And I've since then learned my limitations. I love Gemara, the Talmud, but I'm not great at it. I have to really break my teeth on it. Torah, Tanakh, I don't have to break my teeth on so much. My biblical Hebrew is much, much stronger, and my ability to read the commentaries is much, much stronger than reading the Talmud itself. So that's my niche, that, and of course, prayer. And that came about through that year where I had organized that class in my mom's memory, where I really did a deep dive and really had some of my favorite people teaching me and my friends about prayer. You, Rabbi Kanevsky, Rabbi Sean Fieldsmeyer, Chaim Seidler-Feller.
What is the chut for your mother's memory? That's quite a group. My background is in music as well. And I had a very, very strict classical training where, I had to do scales and arpeggios for an hour every morning. And, there was a system to it. And I remember when I started learning Jewish texts and I realized, it's the same thing. You have to have the basic skills. You need to be able to say your prayers without having to think about it. You need to know the text so that in the moment where you need to say something important, you don't have to think about the words.
Right.
And that's what I felt was happening with you during that year. That yeshiva background gave you all your scales and arpeggios and music theory.
Yeah.
And then you got to a point in your life where you needed to say something deep and something important and something soulful. And thankfully, you had the tools to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And Wexner really, it's been a fascinating process. And it ties back to something you and Ray Janvey both said to me after our culmination, commencement, graduation, whatever it was. You each challenged me to use what I learned, both on leadership and Torah and the Jewish stuff, and find a way to integrate it with music. And because I was still very much in mourning, even though we graduated 2 years after my mother died, roughly, I could not think about performing. I could not really think about songwriting. I wasn't able to think out of the box. Eventually, like Rabbi Kanevsky asked me to start playing kumsitzes again because I took the year off when my mom died. A kumsitz is a sing-along. What we learned, I was able to make concrete in that I started giving divrei Torah, little speeches about Torah. I started having a regular chavrusa, a learning partner. I would teach classes at shul on Shavuos, on the Pentecost holiday. And I would try to make some of them about music. If it wasn't a Shabbos or a holiday, I would include an instrument and we do a little bit of sing-along like that. But it was very binary. I was not really able to figure out how to combine the two until I started writing songs inspired by Jewish texts. It started with my kids, but eventually it evolved into the project we're here talking about today.
So I have to tell you, my very first thing that I thought when I heard the song was how poetic that I very much remembered teaching in memory of your mother. And the song or the psalm that you gave me was Psalm 49, which is a psalm that is said in a house of mourning.
Yeah.
And that just resonated for me so deeply. It was like a circle just coming back around. And so that was my first just response to it of, oh, we're going there, are we, Shep? Okay.
I don't think you understand the impact you had on me in that moment. You really helped ground me. And so it was very bechavana.
That was very much felt. And that was my initial emotional response. And then my thought that came to my head was actually the word pastor, that you used the word pastor in the song. I grew up in the Baptist Bible Belt in sort of Central Florida, but before Disney World. So, really the rural Confederate South. I associate the word pastor with my childhood. And it really made me start thinking because my emotional response to the song was about sitting shiva. But then you kept talking about the pastor being there. And so I started to wonder, what was the picture in your head of this shiva home? Or was this not a Jewish shiva home? Was this a different kind of home that was in mourning?
Right. It's a great question. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to talk about the songwriting process itself. Timmy posted this prompt, brought the bread. All of my fearless songwriting stuff I co-write with my friend from college, Liz Hanlon, and I used to do it on my own, but now this is my thing. I do this with Liz. Liz lives in New York, and she's a beautiful, brilliant poet. She had never written lyrics until I brought her into this process. The first one we wrote together ended up being a spoken word piece, foul language, but it's one of my favorites among what I've done. If I have time the night before, I will start us off. If I'm doing this alone, I spend 10 minutes writing lyrics, 10 minutes refining them, 20 minutes writing music, and 20 minutes recording. And of course, those all get expanded. That's why I give myself 90 minutes, but those are my goals. So what you're about to see is my first stream of consciousness in response to that. This just came out of me in verse form. The room filled with conversation, forks and knives clink against their plates. Sister drinks generic whiskey, brother vodka tonic that he hates. I have no idea how I got there in this moment, except you close your eyes, brought the bread, now guessing. When do you bring bread? Well, you bring bread to a person's house. So I want to write a song about a Shabbos lunch? No. When else do you bring bread? Well, you bring bread when someone is in mourning or someone's sick. At the time that I wrote this song, one of our very dear friends was sick. She has since passed. It was too close for me to write about taking care of friends. But I'd lost both of my parents. We'd lost other friends and family over the years. So the mourning space is something I was familiar with. And I think that that's where this bubbled up from. Anyway, we don't need to look at the rest of it.
I want to look at the rest of it because that first stanza, and I think that first stanza very much took me back to my rural Christian roots, where it was alcohol that fueled difficult emotions.
Right.
When you have difficult emotions, you drink.
Right.
I'm not saying that Jews don't do that, but that's not the initial Jewish response in the same way that it was in the place that I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And so that first verse, when I heard it, just took me back to my childhood, took me back to, kind of the wake sort of culture, that other kinds of cultures really do that as part of their grief process.
Right.
And then we had a pastor bringing fruitcake. Fruitcake was like the Christmas gift, and the pastor's bringing it. And his mama brought the wine, is interesting in your initial text.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you go all Jewish on me. This is where you say there's nothing left to be said, which is such a Jewish way of mourning.
Yeah.
Right? You walk into a shiva home, and a lot of people don't know how to do shiva in the traditional way, and they're nervous, so they come in and they start chattering. But actually, shiva, traditionally speaking, you wait for the mourner to indicate what they want to talk about, if they want to talk, all of that. I've gone into shiva homes before where I have gone in, sat next to the mourner, held their hand for half an hour, and we haven't said a word because that's where they were in that moment. So this idea of not speaking, that silence being a way of processing grief is there. And then you hit me with the clinker, which is you bring bread. Bread is not something you bring to a shiva house, right? The traditional foods in a shiva house would be round things symbolizing life, an egg or a lentil or, something like that. Bread is what nourishes the body. And bread is also the one food that has this bizarre bracha, this bizarre blessing of hamotzi lechem min haaretz, who brings the bread from the land. Right? You praise God for bringing bread from the land. But we all know that bread does not come from the land. Wheat comes from the land, or corn or oats or some kind of grain. And then human beings have to work in partnership with God on this. So bread symbolizes partnership with God. At the exact moment, shiva is not a time where you feel like partnering with God, right? Shiva is the moment where you just are like, what are you thinking, you divine expletive, right? And here you are, there's silence, and yet you're bringing bread. So, Shep, what is that about?
The Fearless community, because it is ecumenical, I'm writing to that audience. And I know that Scott, I'm forgetting his last name, he's older than I am. I don't know how old he is, 70-something. Great songs, country, Western, really Western. But I know that he's a pastor. So as I'm scribbling, he came to mind. And of course, he later told me that in all his life as a pastor, he never brought fruitcake. But, I wasn't going to say babka. It just doesn't sing as well. And then I would have to make it Rabbi Kanevsky or Rabbi Browse brought the fruitcake. And that also doesn't sing as well. And so you take facts that are particular and you find a way to make them universal. It could have been Billy brought the fruitcake. But as I was writing this, I wanted the person bringing the sweet food to be someone who also had a spiritual leadership role in this little community.
There's something so beautiful about that. The thing I love about a good shiva, and there really is such a thing as a good shiva. A good shiva is one where you suddenly find, even if you knew several dimensions of the person who you're saying goodbye to, you don't know all of their dimensions. And a really good shiva is when people from all the different dimensions of their life show up and you start to get to see this person in their entirety. People that they knew from their childhood and people they know from work and people they know from, their tennis club and people they know from all of this, and everybody sort of comes together. So you're right. I think having the pastor there, right, for whoever it is that we're mourning for in this song, suddenly says, oh, well, this person had a relationship with this pastor, and this person had really all of these diversity and the richness of who this human being was and all the different relationships that they had.
And I think that really underscores what I'm trying to get at. This is a complicated room in this song. I'm going to go back to the final version. And by the way, it usually doesn't work like this. Usually I'll write something and Liz has so many questions and really kind of manipulates the language. This one, she didn't manipulate it too much. She asked questions and was satisfied by my answers, and we cleaned it up. Usually with hers, I'm like, okay, there's nothing for me to do here except write a melody. So yay, I'll get my part done in a timely manner. Getting back to it, there's complexity in this room. And I think that's what I was trying to bring out. There's no shiva that's just, oh, wow, we all miss this person. We all loved this person. Inevitably, even when you love someone, there are moments where you may not hate them, but you'll be angry at them. You'll be disappointed by them. You'll be frustrated by them. And even if everyone in the family is perfectly emotionally and physically healthy, they may still need the support of things that might lead to unhealth. And that's where the vodka comes in. The room is filled with conversation, but it's not conversation about the deceased. It's conversation about gossip, news, and school, right? Because that's what happens at a shiva. And by the way, that's what happens in the wakes I've been to, the houses of mourning I've been to in non-Jewish contexts. It's sometimes you are lucky enough, as you put it, to go to a good shiva where people are respectful of the silence and, most important, the needs of the mourners, right? Because some mourners can't handle the silence. They need to talk. They need you to talk. And sometimes they want you to talk about the deceased, and sometimes they want you to talk about anything but the deceased.
Exactly. I once had a friend just say to me, I came over, I was sitting there next to her, and she said, please just tell me some gossip of what's going on outside. I've been in this room for 5 days. I have had it. Just tell me something juicy that's going on in the world. And that's what she needed, and that's what she wanted. And I thought, okay, I could distract you. So yeah, it's not always this sort of somber, morose, serious thing. Sometimes it's quite playful. But you're right. Traditionally, Judaism will say you follow the lead of the mourner. But because of our, I think, contemporary discomfort with death and illness and loss, we have all sorts of defense mechanisms that kick in. And therefore, the crowd starts, remember it, shiva for my sister. This very well-meaning woman came up to me and started asking me which doily I thought would be better on the table where they were going to lay out all the food. And I remember just thinking, I know you're trying to be helpful here, and you're asking me because you want to involve me, but, I just buried my sister. What? I mean, I'm not going to do an expletive on your podcast, but what?
It's okay if you feel like it.
What are you thinking, asking me about doilies? And so there's just a mismatch there of the intention of that person, which was clearly to be helpful and supportive, and what I needed right then, which was just to rail against the world and to feel like I can't do that in your face because you are not going to be able to hold my emotions.
Yeah.
Whereas the rabbi at the time, actually, do you know what he did? He was great. He took, because I needed to rip my clothing and nobody else in the family needed that. My family doesn't come from that tradition and it would have made them uncomfortable, but I needed that. And I had told him that earlier in the day. And he said to me, Shoshana, and he pulled me into the broom cupboard. And the two of us are in the broom cupboard. And he just let me. I ripped my clothing. I wailed. He held me. And 10 minutes later, we walks out. And my mother said, what were you guys doing in there? And he just looked her straight in the eye and said, rabbi stuff. Can't possibly say. But that was good shiva. Like that was him looking at me and going, she's going to explode if I don't let her tear something.
Yeah.
And taking me into a space where I could do that.
Right. And finding the right response, which in the telling of your version of that story was playful in a way that maybe your mom got, but at minimum you got. And it's that sense of play that I think people have trouble talking about death. And Ikar, a few years ago, I think before the pandemic, did a thing with, I think there's a website, I think that may be what it's called, talking about death. And we spent a year doing learning related to death and about how to talk about it. And in the wake of that, we created Hevra Kadisha, which you're not supposed to talk about.
But we need to talk about so that people actually know about it.
Exactly. So do you want to explain what a Hevra Kadisha is?
A Hevra Kadisha is the most extraordinary institution that we don't talk about. When a Jew dies, basically, in Judaism, we use the mikvah, the ritual bath, as a way of moving status, right? So when you convert, you go to the mikvah and you dip into the water, into the living water, right? When you want to transition from being impure to pure, you dip into it. I've often taken people there after a miscarriage. There's a way of using it as a transition ritual. When you die, that is the transition par excellence. So basically, we bring the mikvah to the body because the body can't walk down into the mikvah. And you have a group of people, the Hevra Kadisha, literally that it means the holy friendship circle, right? And they clean the body and they basically pour the mikvah water over the body. So they bring the mikvah to the body and then they dress the body, and it's done with such respect. And at the end of doing this, I remember when I was being taught how to do this, you actually ask forgiveness of the body, of the soul of the person. And you ask forgiveness in the process of doing this sacred act. You have in any way embarrassed them or done anything that wasn't respectful of this body.
Right.
And it's the most extraordinarily, paradoxically life-affirming thing you can do, which is to take somebody's bodily remains and treat them with such kavod, such respect, and help those bodily remains transition for their final time. In general, you don't talk about it because you don't want to sort of go, hey, I'm on the Hevra Kadisha, aren't I great? But we need to talk about it because people need to volunteer to do it.
Yeah. The process leading up to death, the processes after death, I think people generally are uncomfortable talking about it. And perhaps in the wake of my mom's death, I learned to just dive in. You have to kind of check out the body language. You have to learn to listen. Another Wexner person, Doug Mankoff, his dad died 2 weeks ago. So we went to shiva there, and Doug, he's clearly sad, right? But he's also very matter of fact in his very kind of humble, understated way, and was able to find a way in which to both express sadness, express gratitude, but also to find humor in telling stories about his dad, because I don't know if it was his kind of very Southern Texas way of making everyone else comfortable, or that's truly how he felt about his dad. It doesn't really matter because it was a very true and natural expression for him. Humor becomes part of the process too. You tell jokes, you tell funny stories. It can get very risque.
Absolutely. Because hopefully there's some people there who knew the person when they were young and, in their goth era. And, when I was in rabbinical school, we had pastoral psychiatry classes, which sort of taught us how to take a family through this process. And one of the things that you do is to start the process before the funeral, you go over and yes, you're talking to the family to get material for the eulogy, but that's a byproduct.
Right.
Of the conversation. That conversation needs to start the family telling stories. And there needs to be a bit of wry humor in there.
Yeah.
So that you show the family that it's safe and it's permitted for them to have some risque memories and some funny memories. Because that process, which then continues during Shiva, is a process whereby memory is being constructed. And it is the only time when you're going to have a collective memory constructed, right? Later on, when you say Kaddish, right, you're going to a minyan and you're saying it with other people at synagogue, or you're saying it on the anniversary of the person's death. And that's a very individual moment where you get to reflect on your own memories and your own feelings about the person. But Shiva is a collective process where if it works well, together you're constructing a memory. So you don't include the funny stuff, and if you don't include some of the happy stuff and some of the sad stuff, then you get a skewed memory.
Yeah.
of this person.
Right.
So I often encourage people for Shiva. I sort of say, even if you're going to have prayers at 8:00, start the Shiva, say guests are welcome from 3:00, so that you have people kind of coming in and there's time and space to start to share those stories. And I also often say to people, and put out some photo albums and put out, a book where people can share some memories, anything that can trigger people to start telling those funny or raucous or poignant memories, and to acknowledge that all of those complex feelings, like you're saying, the room in this song is full of complicated things. Well, let those stories be complicated, just as complicated and rich as this person was in real life.
Right. Yeah, so you hopped. I mean, that's the whole point of the song. It's to really kind of give a moment of reality. But I think for me anyway, I feel like we don't talk about it enough. Years and years ago, Sherry and I were talking to my father-in-law, and we were talking to him about putting together a will and about getting life insurance. It was like, no, the business will take care of it. I don't need to do any of that. And he just didn't want to think about death. And because it is inevitable, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to not only think about preparing for the moment of death, but using that inevitability as inspiration to say, okay, well, what do I want to do in this life? And once you start thinking about that, are you going to regret having gone on vacation with your kids that extra time, or coming home to dinner with your kids, or whatever? Or are you going to regret not having gotten that contract done if you're a lawyer? These are like the good metaphors and good reminders. Our law firm, we have a lot of kavana, intentionality around trying to find balance. We call ourselves a lifestyle firm. It's not that we don't work hard. We very much do work hard. But when your kid's at a soccer game, go to your soccer game, go to work early or work late or get it done later. It's okay. Find the balance to live a whole life. And my partners are very, very supportive of this podcast.
A good mourning process does two things. It pays respect to the person who's died, and it gives them the kavod that is due to them. And it comforts and inspires those who are left behind.
Yeah, for sure.
And those are equal. And in fact, if you think about it, it happens, leading up to the burial. It's all about kavod hamet. It's all about honoring the dead person. And after that last shovelful is in the earth, it shifts. All of the ritual in Judaism shifts to menachem avelim, to comforting the mourners. And I would add to that, a part of that comfort is inspiring us to live better lives as a result of having reflected on the person who's died.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. For some reason, it reminds me of the burial process in Yerushalayim, where the male children are not permitted near the grave if their dad is the one who's being buried. Yeah, it's fine for the mom, but not for the dad. And the mystical reason is there are mazikim.
Demony things. Yes?
Demony things, yeah. Shadow spirits of some sort who are at the entrance to the grave, and they will attack the male children because these mazikim were created by sexual acts that did not result in the creation of children, right? So it's even in that moment, we've moved from you can go near, you can put your shovel full on the earth, but you can't hang around. You have to step aside. There's already that transition in that moment. And then that's followed by the two lines of people that you walk through who are saying over and over a variety of verses, including, may God offer you comfort. And
that's where you change your shoes.
Right. Exactly.
That's the moment where you take off your leather shoes and you put on your mourning gear, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Up until that moment, everything is focused on ensuring that this burial is done properly and with so much respect for the person you're saying goodbye to. And then you literally change your shoes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really amazing. I hadn't thought of that. And then you go home and you sit on a low chair, which differentiates yourself and is in itself a signification of mourning.
Well, and also the two lines that you're talking about are ingenious. right? So, after the grave is filled, the community forms two lines, and it looks like running the gauntlet. Right. You have to sort of, but it's the opposite, right?
Right.
So you have to walk between these two lines as those two lines of people basically recite words of comfort to you.
Right.
Now, why is that ingenious? Because the last thing you feel like doing is walking away from that grave. You want to just sit on top of it and not go anywhere. Right.
Right.
And that moment of transition, like if you think putting a toddler to bed, right? It is that same sort of breaking moment of, I don't want to leave.
Yeah.
I can't leave. I can't turn my back on this grave and walk away from this. And so what Jewish tradition does is put two lines of people there. It's almost like air traffic control. You need to walk this way and everybody's waiting. And nobody else can go until you walk. So we're not going to leave you there, and you're going to be there 5 hours later. And then eventually you're going to have to go home, but you're going to end up doing it alone. No. You're going to walk through that line, and we are going to be here with you on either side.
Yeah. This is the arc of Shiva, because you end Shiva, whereas you started being pushed into community, even though you don't want to be. At the end of Shiva, now everyone follows you out of your house, walks around the block to remind you that even though you are in fact walking alone, your community is with you and we are there to support you, but they're not hovering the same way they are in the two lines. It's a very different, to me, statement than, as you put it, running the gauntlet.
Yeah. When do you see ritual at its most powerful is in transition moments. That's when we do rituals. Yeah. Because we need help getting through those, liminal spaces, as anthropologists would put it. Liminal spaces, being betwixt and between, those are the dangerous moments in life.
Right.
That's why the demons can come out, right? Because there is a dangerous moment there. And so, what do? We have wedding ceremonies, and we have naming ceremonies, and we have harvest ceremonies, and we have any time there's a transition, any religion worth their salt is going to hold your hand with a good ritual that will get you from the beginning of the transition and will keep holding your hand until you're safely on the other side of that transition.
Right.
And so Judaism, holds your hand very, very intensely for the first 7 days, and then a little less intensely for up until 30 days, and then slightly less intensely for another 11 months. And very, very gradually, it really is like watching a toddler walk.
Yeah.
You don't just throw them out into the world and expect them to walk. You hold their hand, you wait in the doorway so they can turn around and look at you. And, emotionally, we're toddlers, no matter how old we get.
Yeah. This is one of the things that the rabbis of the Mishnah and Talmud, I think, really got right. There's so much beauty in the thinking around this. When my mom died, I gave up music. I was bereft. I couldn't bring myself to play. Even for kumsitzes, which that's really for everybody else, but there's too much joy involved in that for me. When my dad died, not that I wasn't grieving, I was, but I've identified that the difference between their deaths for me is that I wasn't prepared for my mother's. But for my father's, I said goodbye to him 15,000 times. I went to Israel 3-4 times a year just to be with him. And I knew it was coming. I was sad, certainly. I grieved, certainly. But I didn't give up music. On the contrary, I used music to help me grieve. As I did with my friend Kim, who died a few months ago. I wrote several songs about things like this that were about death, but not about her. I wrote a song about my mom when she was in the hospital, but I had to trick myself. I was really writing about Kim, but I had to trick myself to process it by writing about my mom. And then when she was in the hospital again, towards the end, I wrote another song. Liz and I actually wrote that. It was a song about, the hospice process. I have yet to write another song for her or about that process now that she's gone, but it's coming. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but
it's simmering.
Yeah. I want to use this as an opportunity to double down. You said that no religion worth its salt doesn't have good rituals around these liminal spaces. And I know that you do work on interfaith. Are there differences that you've seen that you think we can learn from in the Jewish community that we can bring in that the rabbis didn't get it right, whether it's around mourning or around weddings or other things?
Such a good question. I'm going through this with a friend right now, a very, very dear friend who's an Anglican priest, and his mother died 2 weeks ago. And
may her memory be a blessing.
Exactly. And he and I have been discussing, mostly him, talking about the deficits of the Anglican tradition on this because they still haven't had the funeral.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Right?
That's
because
intense.
That's just not part of the tradition. You don't have, the funeral waits and you plan it and all of that. But it means that in that moment of intense shock and grief, there isn't ritual there. And so, he and I have been talking about that, and he's very fluent in Jewish tradition and saying, I want shiva right now.
Can he? Can he make that happen? Whether you call it shiva or...
We talk about that, but I sort of say to him, you're a priest, right? You're doing this for people all the time. What do you do for them? And he said, we just don't do it the way that you do it. And particularly the Anglican church, that line that you had about the mother wearing the pearls and being very stoic. I actually was picturing, his mom because, stiff upper lip and all of that stuff. That's the way you do it. But I will say, as much as, he's having holy envy of Jewish Shiva, I was in the UK during Queen's funeral. And there was something utterly beautiful about a nation mourning for Queen Elizabeth. And these were people who had never met her, but who had felt like she had shared their lives. And the moment that really got me there was actually, they had the symbols of office on her coffin, right? The staff and the orb are the symbols of office. And right before the coffin went into the crypt, I don't know if you saw this part of the ceremony, it was very powerful. Those were lifted off of the coffin. The staff was broken.
Right.
Okay. Broke the staff. And then they were placed on a cushion. They were not handed to King Charles. Later on, right? So, last month, there was a ceremony where they were handed to King Charles.
Sure.
But I thought there was something beautiful and powerful about that moment of saying these symbols of the monarchy, and the monarchy is, traditionally God's presence on earth, right? Those symbols do not belong to a person. They belong to the office.
That's
and so there was
beautiful.
something very transcendent about watching those go to a pillow and sit on that pillow and in a sense be bereft of the person that they were connected to, but not be handed from one person to the next. So, I thought that was a great ritual and it symbolized exactly what it needed to do. And at that moment where those were taken away, I actually thought, this is a woman now. She is a woman who has served her country, and she is now being buried as a human being and returning to her maker. And that office is still solid and strong, and hopefully somebody else will be able to take it up and carry it forward.
Sure. That's beautiful.
It was very powerful. And that was more than just the Anglican tradition. That was a good monarchy ritual, whether or not you agree with the monarchy as a concept. You
Right.
just have to acknowledge the anthropology of it. It
Sure.
worked.
Right. Do you think that there's a corollary where we could include that in modern Jewish life? A ritual like that? Our rabbis, our heads of families, where there's symbols, maybe not a staff and an oar, but symbols where we remind everyone that it belongs to the office, or not, because our structure is too, what's the word I'm looking for? Decentralized.
I think the Jewish allergic reaction to idolatry means that we tend not to bestow objects with that level of meaning. So the only object we do that with is a Sefer Torah.
Right. You mentioned the pillow. We take a glass and we break it, and many people take that. This is at a wedding.
Yeah.
Many people take that glass and turn it into a thing as a reminder that the temple was destroyed, but we are building something new in the wake of that destruction. And this is appropriate conversation for this time because it's the 3 weeks. It's Tisha B'Av on Thursday, today's Monday, and tonight's my father's yurtzeit. So this is a good morning conversation, MOU.
Zichrono livracha. May his memory be a blessing. Yeah, and actually that's quite beautiful, particularly to take it and to create a mezuzah, to put on the doorposts of your home. So if this is a ceremony where the couple, right, you're in the transition from being two single people to a couple, a new family, a new home, right? And to take that symbol of the destruction of the Jewish people's home and to try and reconstruct it, not put it back together, but to take the shards of it and to put that on the doorpost of your own home. I could see that being a very, very powerful way of infusing an object with meaning. And I think a lot of people do that with their ketubah these days, right? Where they frame it and put it on the wall. And again, it's something that you're taking from the chuppah, from the wedding canopy, and you're putting it on your wall in some way. Right. Or like when I do a wedding, I give the couple an assignment to go out and buy a wine cup together.
That's beautiful.
And the first time they use it will be as part of the wedding ceremony. And then my hope is that when they use it on Friday night to do Kiddush every week, it's a mini anniversary of that moment of standing under the chuppah together.
That's beautiful.
So I think you can infuse objects with meaning.
Right.
But it's interesting that, I really have attention on this. I remember, you get buried with your talit, with your prayer shawl, and you cut the tzitzit, you cut the strings so that it's no longer a kosher prayer shawl. I remember doing my uncle's funeral. I loved my uncle. He was just, he used to take me to the racetrack. We used to bet on the horses. He was just a fantastic human being.
What's his name?
Uncle Joe.
May his memory be a blessing.
Oh, it is definitely a blessing. But I remember my ambivalence about burying him with his talit. Because I wanted his talit.
Oh.
I wanted to wear his talit. I wanted to feel him wrap his arms around me. And I remember sort of having this moment of, what if I just take it? What if I just take it? Because at that moment when I was losing him, I just wanted that wrapped around me. And I didn't take it. I buried him with it. And I decided I would just try and construct that for myself when I put on my own talit, that I would try and feel his arms.
Where is he buried?
He's buried in New Jersey.
Because I think in Israel, they don't bury you with the talis, which is why I have my father's talis and my uncle Charlie's talis. And at this point, they're not wearable.
No, and you know what? That's really interesting. You're right, because my husband, his father died when my husband was 15. So he was very young when his father died. And you're right. We used his father's talis as our chuppah, as a way of inviting his father to our wedding.
That's beautiful.
It was very powerful to have his father's talit over our head. You're right. I guess maybe he had an extra talit, or maybe he wasn't buried with it.
I also think that there are different traditions, Hasidic versus Misnagdish, New Jersey versus California,
Yeah.
Artists like David Moss and Jacqueline Nichols, they also live in that tension where, honestly, their art is holy, but yet we don't want to imbue holiness in these objects. I think that goes to the type of holiness, and it goes to like the Hebrew for this, kadosh, and you taught the Kedusha, and we talked about the Hevra Kadisha. It's all the same root. Kadosh doesn't only mean holy, it means separate and apart. And separate and apart. And I forget if it was Sean Fieldsmeyer or Michael Sheffren, these are two rabbis in my life, who mentioned that when you break a glass at a wedding, you are taking an item that is whole and breaking it into pieces. And it brings up the Hasidic teaching that you have to break your heart. And in doing so, you then become open to your spouse in that moment. And your broken hearts together can create something new. And that's why you create the mezuzah, or you put it in your challah board, or whatever it is that you do with that. These objects of art, whether it's a broken glass or the Stender or any of the beautiful art posters of David Moss's that we have in our hallway. They are something that's separate and apart that connects us. And that's the fascinating thing to me about any art that is seeking to explore that which is holy, godly, or communally, or whatever.
I guess the only thing I would disagree with you on
Please.
with that, even though it's really beautiful and I like it, is that I think those objects are not holy in an essential way. They point to holiness.
Agreed.
And we are comfortable with that. We are
Yeah.
comfortable with things pointing to holiness. But in Jewish law, I think I'm right in Jewish law, definitely in the Jewish imagination, in terms of essential holiness, you can have people, you can have places, you can have time that have the word Kadesh.
Right.
The only objects that are like that are the sort of like the adornments of the priest or the objects in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple. Those are the only objects, and those are fashioned by people. There's no inherent holiness. So holiness of things can only be done in partnership with God and people. Holiness in its essence, right? Shabbat is holy. Even if there was no people, if there were no people in the world, Shabbat would still be kadosh.
Right. That's beautiful. Thank you for clarifying that.
And the Temple Mount would be kadosh. And those are things that have nothing to do with human beings, and God infuses them with holiness. And I think the art that you're talking about is something that people have created. And so it sort of points towards holiness as opposed to being inherently holy.
Right. Right. We don't disagree on that. I think that that is a much better way of saying what I was trying to say.
You know who taught me that is goes all back to Wexner. See, everything goes back to Wexner. Rabbi Saul Berman.
Oh, wow.
Rabbi Saul Berman taught me about Kedusha in such an amazing way, and many other things as well.
We live in complexity, and there's nothing left to be said can mean, there's nothing to say, I'm not going to do anything here. Or it can mean, more as I intended it, I'm not going to offer the mourners comfort. They're not going to offer me comfort. It's simply the presence of being together that will offer us comfort. We don't need to say anything. And sometimes you can gild the lily by saying too much. I know that I do that all the time.
It's really been a joy to reconnect with you, to reminisce with you, and to learn from the work that you're doing, and to know that somehow that grew out of that shared experience we had, 20 years ago.
Absolutely. I'm so grateful for all of the learning and all of the friendship and for the time you gave me today and all of the wisdom I've gotten from you. And I look forward to continuing to see you and learning and reporting and all of that. This was really, really great. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for listening. Special thanks to Rabbi Shoshana Boyd Gelfand for joining me, to Liz Hanlon for co-writing this song with me, to Sean Kawanami for his beautiful piano arrangement of the song, to Emil Stern for his help in producing this episode, to E. Rose for his help producing the song and the episode, and to Jessica Hannah Sweedler for her help on social media. You can find Nothing Left to Be Said and all of the other songs in this song cycle on most platforms that stream or download music, including Spotify and Apple. In the next episode of The Rest is Commentary, I will be talking with Colorado singer-songwriter Ingrid Avison. In her spare time, Ingrid also is a grief and trauma therapist. Our conversation is inspired by the song Little Prizes and Psalm 86. For Ingrid, music is a superpower with a voice that shifts from a grounded tremble to a soaring wail. She blends melodic hooks with provocative lyrics and sharp social commentary. In this episode, we discuss grief as a source of pain and inspiration for creativity, how sharing grief through any art form, including songwriting, can foster connection and healing, how collaboration helps build deeper emotional explorations, the impact of how you perform as transforming the way a song is received by others, humor as a potential tool in addressing serious subjects, grief leading to a greater appreciation of life, creating a safe space for emotional expression as the essential ingredient in both therapy and performance, and so much more. Please join us.